All right. I'm excited to be here today with my new friend, Jay Gilbert. Jay is a digital marketing innovator. He's pioneered the industry's first digital only label, and he's run award winning campaigns for Nirvana, Bob Marley, Kiss, and more. He's the founder of Your Morning Coffee, which has over 15,000 readers. He's the co host of three top industry podcasts, and he's a guest lecturer at UCLA, USC, Columbia, GrammyU mentor, Recording Academy voting member, and he is a great source of insights and experience as it relates to the music industry. So I'm really excited to have him on the podcast today, talk a little bit about how things have evolved over the course of the last several decades in the industry and where they're going, and how, if you're an artist right now, you can best get set up to succeed. So, Jay, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. One slight correction: the bio needs to be updated. We just passed 25,000 for the
Oh, wow.
newsletter and for the Your Morning Coffee podcast. Every year at the end of the year, we sort of knock off anyone who hasn't, opened the newsletter in the last year, because people change jobs and that sort of thing. So the list is sort of growing, and then it dips a little bit, and then it grows. But yeah, we just passed 25,000, which isn't massive, but it's the right people: artists, managers, labels, that sort of thing, students.
hmm Awesome. That's a great milestone.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
All right, so let's just dive right in. I would love to hear a little bit about your journey, throughout the course of the music industry, and kind of where you've seen where you things see things evolve. I'm curious to hear from your perspective. What are some of the biggest problems or challenges that you see artists struggling with when they first come to you these days?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you know, there are certain challenges today that maybe weren't around 10 years ago, but a lot of it is exactly the same, right? It's number one, it's having great music. Let's start there. Okay. One of my favorite quotes is from Jonathan Daniel from Crush Management. And he has this great quote that I use often. And if you don't know, Crush Management is like Sia, Miley, Green Day, Panic, Train. I mean, Jonathan's an awesome person, but he runs a great company too. The quote is, if you give me a great song, my job is easy. If you give me a good song, my job is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And today, if you record music, Michael, and you put it up on DSPs, it's alongside of Drake, Billie Eilish, the Chainsmokers, Oasis, whoever. You have to look and sound buttoned up. It has to be world class. So let's start with great music, and everything we talk about after that is just assuming that you put out the best music that you can possibly put out. The challenges today is that the barrier to entry is so low, right? You and I could record something on an iPad and get it up on SoundCloud and YouTube tonight. We could get it on all the DSPs across the world in a matter of days. Okay, so that used to be a problem, right? Because there were gatekeepers, labels, distributors. Well, now that's gone. So there's this fire hose of creativity, of songs being uploaded to all these services, not just the DSPs, but YouTube. And how do you rise above that clutter? So there's some new challenges, but some of the new challenges are the same as the old challenges. And what I would say is that it's still about growing an audience and engaging with that audience. And that sounds pedantic, but I would rather have a video with 1,000 views and 1,000 comments than a million views and no comments. It's not just about reaching people, because we all have these social media feeds and short form video, TikTok, Reels, Shorts. I mean, it's just a barrage of all this stuff that it takes a little bit more work, I think, to really connect with an audience, right? So you've got great music, you're consistent in your marketing and in your recording, your writing, your touring. That consistency pays dividends. But at the end of the day, there's always going to be new tools and tactics to get your music in front of people. And that's great. And you should know what those tools and tactics are and be a student of the game and use them and try them and The ones that work, use. The ones that don't, you don't. And you have to be open to learning and trying those things. But at the end of the day, it's really a lot of what it was 10, 20 years ago. And I'll give you one last example. I moderated this panel at Music Tectonics on data and A&R.
Mm,
And people are talking about the different platforms and the analytics that they use and how they can discover developing artists that are flying under the radar. And I
mm,
asked this one person who was an A&R person, how do you discover new talent today? And he said, I look for a lineup around the block to see them play on a Tuesday night. And
mm,
I thought, wow, that's old school. That's refreshing.
mm,
So that's sort of where we're at today.
mm. Good stuff. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that, like some of the tactics and the specific tools and techniques might evolve over time, but really like a lot of the foundations and the fundamentals are things that have been true, since decades ago, and they're still true today.
That's right.
And one of those things is great, quality music. And I mean, yeah, I guess today we could probably, if we wanted to, we probably could create a song on suno.com, and that's a
Yeah.
whole can of worms, but we could probably create that in a matter of minutes, and then put that out, at least just distribute it online on social media and whatever. And so how do you cut through the noise and actually create
Yeah.
quality content that rises above the clutter, and building an authentic relationship with your
Yeah.
fans? So rather than just views or kind of surface level metrics, how do you actually build an authentic relationship?
Yeah. That's
And the
exactly it.
example, awesome, the example you shared too of the A&R rep who looks at uh, the people who are actually putting butts in seats at
Yeah.
shows as an example of that level of connection being the most important thing. That's
Yeah.
definitely refreshing.
Yeah.
um, so I'm curious to hear your perspective for someone who's, let's say that there's an artist who's watching or listening to this right now, and they are relatively early on. They are an independent artist, and they are, they have their heart set on doing music full time, and it's their goal and their dream to turn this into a full time career. And they, let's say that they have a bunch of songs they've written, but they haven't recorded them professionally yet, and they're just sort of like, what do I like? Where do I get started? How do I create that kind of quality music that's going to allow me to turn this into a real career?
Yeah.
What do your recommendations be for them to kind of nail that first point of you creating the music?
Yeah. I mean, today it's so much easier than it was in years past to create great sounding demos and recordings. Digital audio workstations, they should familiarize themselves with the various digital audio workstations that are out. And you don't have to have a ton of equipment, but you should have the basics to be, a decent microphone and whatever your instrument is. But I think it comes down to experimentation. I'll give you an example with just podcasting. I'm sure that when you started podcasting, you're like, oh gosh, what mic should I use? What distributor should I use? What platform? I mean, you try things. In January, we passed our 1,000th podcast, and we've tried every mic, every board, everything, and I've settled on my equipment. Love it. It took me a while to get there, and I think with somebody who's writing and recording today, you know, talk to your friends that are musicians. Look online on YouTube and see what are people, what kind of equipment are they using, what kind of software, what kind of digital audio workstations, what kind of tools. Then once you sort of have that, you can kind of evolve. But when you make a demo of something, there are so many tools out there to make those demos sound amazing. I work with some professional songwriters, and some of them are actually using platforms like Suno. Suno is not what a lot of people read about in the press. It's not simply a platform where you do a text prompt and it creates a song that's trained off of somebody else's work. What Suno is evolving into is basically more of a digital audio workstation. And one of the ways that some of our songwriters use Suno is they will upload their piano or guitar track for a song. And then they'll sort of go through the options, like what would a string section sound like on this, or a horn section, or different rhythm sections, and all of that, and just experiment. Oh, that works. And they bring that down, broken up into stems. They put their own vocal on it. They play on top of it. And some of these demos, they're incredible. I mean, they sound like a finished album, but that's how Nashville is versus a lot of other places where talent breaks from, is that it's very competitive in Nashville, but it's also very collaborative. People co-write with each other all the time. They record with each other all the time, and their demos are incredible. Typically,
Mm.
they're world class, and I would encourage your listeners and viewers to check out a documentary called "It All Begins with a Song," and it's available
Mm.
on Amazon, I believe, and it breaks down the Nashville singer-songwriter, mostly songwriter, ecosystem, and how it's a business, and how songwriters go about creating their art. So for a new developing artist today, man, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. You need to use all these tools that you have that people didn't have 10, 20 years ago. You've also got something at your disposal, and I tell college students this all the time because it can move mountains. And that is, my old boss used to tell me, nobody wants to give you a job, but everybody wants to give you advice. And I'll never forget
Mm.
that because it's so true. Don't ask somebody for a job or for something. Ask them for guidance or advice. And I'll give you
Mm.
one example. So you've got a new developing artist, and let's say they want to be, I don't know, they want to play festivals, or they want to play EDM music, whatever it is. At their fingertips, they can go online and find out other people that are doing that, who their managers, producers, engineers, booking agents. They can find all of this online for any of those artists, and they can reach out to them via LinkedIn or social media DMs, what, YouTube, whatever it is. You can reach out and go, "Hey, Michael, I know you do this thing. I'm a struggling, new developing artist. I just graduated from school. I need a little guidance. Could I trouble you for a quick Zoom to ask you a few questions?" 9 times out of 10, that person's going to go, "Sure, of course." And that's something that we didn't have 10, 20 years ago. And now a developing artist could actually speak to uh, another artist or manager or important person that they can get great advice from.
Mm. Good stuff. Don't ask for a job, ask for advice.
Yeah.
It does seem like asking for advice is is sort of like a compliment. It's a compliment to the person you're talking to too. It makes them um,
Yeah.
feel good. Feels good to pass it forward. Sweet. One question that I have for you is around monetization and like sustainability for an artist.
Hmm.
Um, right now, you've mentioned how there's all these tools that didn't used to exist that just make it so much easier to create and to create high quality content in a way that just wasn't possible in the past. And now, well, I'm going to take back my question because there's a step in between there that is super important, even before we talk about monetization, which is what you
Sure.
described earlier around connection and building a community and an audience.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to hear you share from your experience. How does an artist, especially in today's day and age where there's more music than ever, it's easier to make music, and we have
Hmm.
all the social media tools to apparently connect with people. How do you recommend the artist actually approach, this a task of connecting and building an audience?
Yeah. It is the number one question, and I'm so glad you asked it. Let's start with zero. Let's say that you're a developing artist and you don't have any fans yet. You haven't put out any music yet. You haven't played live yet. You're just starting out. So the first thing I would advise that person to do is develop a street team. And that
Mm.
sounds, expensive and complicated. It's not. A street team is your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your mom, your dad, your buddy, your uncle. Your street team, I mean, you look at artists today, huge touring artists. are still surrounded by some of their original street team, the Taylor Swifts of the world. So surround yourself with trusted people who will tell you what they really think of the art that you're creating. But then as you start playing live and you start recording and you start releasing music and you have this group around you, maybe one of them's good at editing short form video. Maybe one of them's good at posting things to social media or editing, longer form YouTube, or everybody sort of has their roles and responsibilities, and you can move mountains with a small street team, right? As you start releasing music, then other things kick in, like making sure that this sounds pedantic, but when somebody posts a comment on YouTube, that you respond to that person, or if it's on social media, whatever, make sure that you're engaging with your fans, with people who like what you're doing. The other thing that I think is really important and is getting more important as a developing artist, collaboration, right?
Mm.
Not just co-writes, but who would you like to open for? Who would you like to have open for you? What covers, would resonate with you? I had an artist who during lockdown started recording songs of artists that they admired that were strong women. Well, guess what? Those strong women, once they heard that music, they reached out to them, and then they started co-writing and recording with some of their favorite artists. There's some really crazy cool things that can happen with collaboration, but you just sort of you build these blocks, and once you get people who are sort of a core group, you can have a Patreon, you can have a private group where they get things maybe a little earlier than everybody else, or maybe they see the demoing process or some behind the scenes things, and you try to reward those super fans, those people who are, who they are, the ones that are going to be there for everything that you do. But it's about two things. It's about that growing that audience that we talked about, right? And that's a challenge, but challenge accepted, right? You can play live and grow that audience. You can do those collabs that we just talked about. You can do, an interesting cover if that fits your brand, who you are. You can do brand partnerships, even as a developing artist. There's a lot of ways to connect to an audience, but I feel like where some developing and middle class artists fall down is they get a little bit lazy in the engagement part of it, and that is doing things. I just went to a show about a week ago. An artist does an annual show just for their fan club. Does a full-on show just for their fan club. I thought that was really cool. I mean, how
Mm.
special are you starting to feel when you get something that everybody else doesn't get? But
Mm.
I think that just engaging with your fans can move mountains, because maybe you don't have 100,000 fans. Maybe you just have 1,000 true fans. That can be a business and sustainable.
Mm. So good. I don't think you're aware of this, Jay, but we actually have a software as a service platform that we've been developing over the past couple of years called Street Team, and it's literally designed for exactly what you're describing, with helping artists in that initial stage to honor and reward their top fans for being a part of their community and helping them grow. So there's gamification, incentives, and ways for them to share exclusive content. And when the time is right, they have their inner circle where they have paid membership, sort of like Patreon, and all of that just like speaks perfectly to why we built the platform in the first place. And what I'm hearing you say is that really, like, the number one most important thing is the connection that artists are building with their fans. It's the relationships, and one thing to be careful of, and just really treat with the importance that it merits, because it's the most important thing, is the engagement, is the relationships, the connections, what you're doing to show up for your fans and build that relationship, including things like responding to their comments and paying attention to to
Yeah.
those people and shining a light on them.
I'd like to try
Awesome.
out your platform because it sounds like we're speaking the same language. I'll give you one other quick example. Um, for those of your listeners who have ever been on Twitch or visited Twitch, or there's so many things that they're doing right there. You go in to see your favorite artist, maybe recording something, and they're like, "Oh, hey, Jay's here. Great to see you, Jay." And other fans are talking to you. Man, you are invested now. And then the other thing is, on social media, when you get your picture taken with one of your favorite artists, that's currency. You know what I mean? Like that is a deeper level of engagement. They're posting that to show their friends, I'm cooler than Michael because I got my picture taken, with my favorite artist here. It's a different world in that regard. It used to be so detached. I grew up loving bands like, Cheap Trick and Queen. And, I couldn't reach out and have a conversation, a DM with Freddie Mercury. But today, I went to a show the other day and the artist is like, between songs, "Hey, Jay's here tonight. Hey, Jay, thanks for coming." Like that sort of give back thing, that engagement. Now you're set for life. Like you're going to defend that artist. Now it's a sense of ownership. And I think that's sort of what you're talking about with your platform is tools that allow you to go deeper and really connect. You mentioned the word gamification, which can be really powerful. It's just a deeper form of engagement.
Mm, that's it. Exactly. And it's awesome that you brought up Twitch as an example. We just completed our annual event here in Orlando at our studio, and we had an artist who happened to be here who was like one of she's a Twitch partner. She's an amazing live streaming artist and built a six-figure income primarily through streaming twice a week. And she did a workshop all about live streaming and just talked about the benefits of live streaming and ultimately exactly what you're describing, like the connection that comes from the features that they've added.
Yeah.
And that it was a reminder for me personally with the platform that we're building with Street Team how important live streaming and that connection point is. So you can bet that we left that session with like a big list of line items for our developers to be like,
Yeah.
these are some really fun ideas to be able to help artists connect more and honor their fans, and that live connection is just
It's
something about
it's
that.
special, and I'm glad you
Mm.
mentioned that because live streaming isn't as sexy as it was during lockdown, um, but it's still very effective, and you can deepen relationships with it. And I think people honestly should do more of it. It reminds me a little bit of, let's say, email. Some people call it ECRM or CRM, consumer relationship management. Email works. And if you can get an email address of your fans and communicate directly with them, because a lot of these platforms disintermediate you, and you can't directly communicate with your fans, which that's a whole nother show. But if you can have that relationship, whether it's a cell number, you can text them, whether it's their email address, and you mentioned, that engagement on Twitch, then you start developing a community, right? And I always think of it as like these artists that do it right. When you go to, like, when Jimmy Buffett was alive and you went to one of his shows, they called them parrot heads. You're part of a community. You go to a Grateful Dead show, you're one of the Deadheads. You're part of this family, and it's today with the BTS Army and Swifties with Taylor Swift and on and on and on. If you can go past just a fan and develop a community, a family, a thing, man, you've crossed into another realm.
Mm. That's a great word to describe it. It's like sort of that family connection to the community. And yeah, it definitely seems like live, whether that's live streams, like sort of like the digital equivalent to live shows, but even like live shows themselves. Maybe it's just like the fact that it's live. Yeah, there's something about that connection where people
Yeah.
can be together, they can belong together, and it kind of creates those
Yep.
roots.
100%.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing
Mm.
like it. I went to a show a couple nights ago. A friend of mine is in Lainey Wilson's band, and I saw Lainey playing the LA Forum, and that's a big room. And it felt like everyone was on the same page. I mean, it was electric. Even from the opening band, Ernest opened, came out,
Mm.
and I mean, you just don't hear that roar for an opening artist very often. Like they were there for the night to enjoy the show. And it really felt like if you've ever been at a sporting event, and let's say you and I don't know each other and we're sitting next to each other at a Viking game and they score, we're high fiving each other. I
Mm.
don't know you, you know me. It's boom, we're part of a thing. And when you cross that in that music realm, it just gets amplified, I think.
Mm. 100%. It's funny you mentioned Ernest. Our guitarist from our band, when we toured for about 10 years before I started my family and started Monetization, and he actually went on to he's the guitarist for Ernest right now.
Oh,
So you probably
really?
saw him perform
Did.
with Ernest on that show.
I did. I was sitting closer to the drummer, watching him. The guitar player came back and forth, but I do remember him. I mean, if you can't have fun at an Ernest show, you probably don't have a pulse. I mean,
Right.
you look around the audience and everybody was smiling. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Eh, That's a great sign.
Yeah, 100%. So, cool. So, we've kind of talked about the two of the biggest pillars, right? One, starting with the song, starting with the music, having something that's high quality, that's going to actually resonate and provide value, to people who are listening to it. And two, talking through the connection, the audience, and building real roots, real communities.
Yeah.
And the third thing that would love to hear your perspective on is around sustainability and how artists can generate revenue and an income with their music so they can afford to spend more time doing it and reaching more people.
Yeah. It's the music business, right? It's a business, but it's also got a 93% failure rate if you're just looking at ROI.
Mm.
I had an artist manager tell me one time, music isn't what you do, it's who you are. You don't have a
Wow.
choice. I used to
Mm.
tour as a musician. You used to tour as a musician. I would bet you my car that you still play. And maybe it's for your dog, maybe it's for your kids, but you're not going to stop playing. You're gonna.
Mm.
It's who you are, right?
Mm.
But it's a business. So how do you make money in music, right? Well, today the top two, touring and merch. It used to be recorded music. Well, people will get down on Spotify and DSPs and YouTube and, oh, they don't pay artists enough. They don't pay artists, never have. They pay rights holders, right?
Mm.
So if you look at the amount of music that's out there, according to Luminate, there's a little over 200 million ISRCs. Those aren't necessarily individual tracks, but for the sake of this exercise, let's just say that there's 200 million tracks that are out there. 87% of them have been streamed 1,000 or less times. Okay.
Wow.
Now, Spotify passed a thing a couple years ago or 18 months ago, whatever it was, where if you're streaming 1,000 or less than 1,000 in the last 12 months, you're not getting paid out.
Mm.
Okay. So there's a ton of music out there. Very little of it is really rising to the top. So streaming can be very lucrative if you're Bad Bunny, if
Mm.
you're, you know, BTS. But streaming pays out roughly $3,000 to $5,000 for every million streams. People think that there's a per stream rate. There's not. There's a pool of money every month. We use this thing called the pro rata model versus user centric. And with pro rata, you've got a pool of money, and then it's broken up. Let's say you're Republic and you're 6% of the streams that month, you get 6% of the pool. Okay. So it'd be great if I listened to Michael Walker all month. That's all I listen to. Well, your rights holder, whether it's DistroKid, CD Baby, TuneCore, or Atlantic Records, the rights holder should, you should benefit from that. You should get the 70% of that 9.99 or 10.99, whatever. But that's not the way it works
Mm.
today. So to get back to your question on revenue, you're going to make your most money from playing live and selling merch. So, you should make sure that you have a compelling offer on both of those things. You know, I consider vinyl a merch item. You know, we've gone from ownership to access, but for some of us, we're slipping back into ownership again. I love vinyl. I have a turntable sitting right here. You've read the stat that half the people that listen to vinyl don't, or buy vinyl, don't own a turntable. And that's not really accurate. If you look at the Luminate report, they break it down by age group. Yeah, for millennials, it's close to being true. But if you're a little bit older, no, that's not really the case. So you can make money on premium vinyl. I had one of my artists sell a double album for $100, and they sold out. And the reason for it was a beautiful package with a couple of posters. It was on orange vinyl. I couldn't wait to get it. You know, it was like I had to have that thing. So I see that as sort of a merch item. But there are other ways of monetizing, and that's probably for another show. And there's some, the Braybeck brothers have a really great book on all the different ways that you monetize music. But I'll tell you some obvious ones: sync licensing, getting your music placed in film, TV, games. You know, the average one's around $7,500. You're not going to retire from it. But I have one client who bought his condo with one sync. So if you have a song that's in demand, you can make some serious money on sync licensing, right? And then you have things like brand partnerships, and it goes all the way down to people who sell loops and beats. And, you know, we could go on for hours and hours, but really the ones you want to focus on, touring and merch, that's where you're going to make a majority of the money that you make. And hopefully you have some really great music that, you know, people will stream, but don't get down on the streaming services, because I don't subscribe to that. Let's use Spotify, because people pick on Spotify. They pay out nearly 70% of the revenue they take in, right? And again, that goes to the rights holders. But a stream is not worth a download. A download isn't worth a CD, and a CD is not worth premium vinyl. All of these configurations have different values, in my humble opinion. And I feel like the last thing I'll say on this caffeinated rant is that I believe that you go to where the party is. Don't try to build your own party, right? Look and see, what are those artists that we talked about earlier that you want to open for, or have open for you, or collaborate with, write with? What are they doing? You know, what's working, what's not working? Are there certain merch items that people are selling that seem to be doing really well? I remember when Pledge Music was around, I used to see these reports on what people were buying, and socks were really high on the list. I bought a pair of Cheap Trick socks, and I was like, wow, like you wouldn't really think to make socks for your merch table, but it's things like that. There are a lot of ways to monetize your music and exploit it, and I mean that in the best possible way. But it brings me to that final point, which is you just have to educate yourself on all the different options. Look online at all of your favorite artists. What are they doing to monetize? Is it experiences? Can you go to the show and do a paid meet and greet, or get your picture taken with the band? There's some experiences that you buy on people's websites where they'll write a song with you, or they'll write a song with your lyrics, or they'll give you handwritten, you know, song sheets and stuff. It's only limited by your imagination and what you're willing to work to do.
Awesome. Yeah, good stuff. So, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that most of the different monetization options really kind of stem from that second point that we talked about around the connection with the community.
100%.
And, you know, if you have that audience, if you have that community, then you can do things like perform live and go
Yeah.
play shows. And those live shows, those live experiences are something that people are willing to pay a premium for.
100%.
And collectibles and merch items, whether that's vinyl or t-shirts or other things that help those fans who identify and connect with the community express themselves and express that identity, is a great way to generate revenue for the music business as well.
Yeah.
Experiences, that's one that seems like a lot of our artists are finding the most benefit from right now is what you described around like those custom songs and doing things like retreats, fan retreats,
Yeah.
and private shows, things that are really at like a premium, unique value. Sync licensing.
Yeah.
It's
There
great. This
there
is
are
like a
some
master class.
artists. There's some artists out there that are doing some really creative things. We were working with some of the members of Jellyfish a few years ago. They had a side project, and you could not only have them write a song with you, but they'd go record shopping with you. They'd have dinner with you.
Mm,
They'd give you a piano lesson. There were all sorts of these. They'd do an outgoing phone message for you. There were all sorts of those things, but it even gets better than that. There's so many more things. Like I'll give you an example. Walden, the band Walden, did a 50-state tour that was fan funded.
mm,
Fans even paid for their flights to go to Hawaii and to Alaska and
mm,
everything. They stayed at fans' houses, and it was just so wonderful watching that sort of take place. But one of the
mm,
things that I loved about their website back in the day, and I've seen other artists do this, you go on to their merch page, and yeah, you can buy the t-shirt and the coffee mug, but then you could fill up their tank. You could buy them coffee. You could buy them lunch, by clicking that thing. And then in the mail, you'll get a Polaroid from them signed of them eating that meal that you just bought them. Again, you just have
wow.
to open up your mind to the possibilities and look what other people are doing and what you're willing to do. And one thing that, as you were saying that, it reminded me of when I sit down with an artist or a manager initially, when I'm about to onboard them, I go through a few questions. And we've covered, I think, three of the top five, but one that's number two. I'll just roll it over for you. Like number one is goals. Like, what are your goals? Because we need to know
Mm,
if we're overperforming, underperforming. If you're a jazz artist, you might want accolades and to play the Village Vanguard and be on the cover of Downbeat. But if you're an EDM artist, it's about festivals and streaming and other things. Everybody has different goals. So I start with the goals. So now we know what we're aiming for. But the
mm,
second thing, and the one thing we haven't talked about yet, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, it's something that we find gets neglected, but is super powerful. And remember, great music is number one. We've put that aside.
mm,
So then we go to goals. The next thing is the narrative. It's so
mm,
important now that if you're putting a song into Spotify submission tool, you have to have a narrative for each song now, right?
mm,
But we've been doing this for decades. And what that means is, why should anybody care, right?
mm,
Let's say you and I, we're a duo. We've got this great song out. Well, we wouldn't put out a press release or a bio that says, oh, Jay and Michael have a new song out. Who cares? Like, what's the narrative? What's it about? Did we overcome adversity? Did we is this something aspirational? Is it something that's near and dear to our hearts? Is it lyrically something that will bring you to your knees? I'll give you one example. The Accidentals, one of their newest songs is Someday We Won't Live Here Anymore. And you listen to the lyrics, and it will stop you dead in your tracks. It's basically saying, all this stuff we have, someday someone else is going to live here,
mm,
right? Someday you're not going to be here, and someday we won't live here anymore.
mm,
And they co-wrote that with Gary Burr and Georgia Middleman, who, if you Google them, they're some of the most elite songwriters on the planet and have written so many hit songs. It's crazy. But the point is, if you have a good narrative, like you and I, well, everybody, we're story listeners and we're storytellers, right?
mm,
So if you have a powerful narrative, people are drawn to that. Oh my God, Michael wrote this song, and it's about this thing, and I believe that's really powerful. Um, that narrative isn't just for the song; it can be for the album, EP, but it also can be you as an artist. You know, uh, Gay, straight, introvert, extrovert, whatever. You've got a narrative, and if you get on the same page with that narrative, let's say it's you and me and our street team, then if somebody's in an elevator and somebody goes, "Oh yeah, I booked that festival, or I work at Good Morning America or NPR." You've got 30 seconds in that elevator to give them a pitch. Like, what are you working on? That's the narrative. And if you do it and I do it, it amplifies it because we're all on the same page. So we started with great music, then we go to goals, we go to narrative. You and I have already talked about sort of the monetization part of it. But when we talk about audience, I feel there's some misconceptions about audience. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that because you deal in this stuff too. And that is that I look at it like there's three audiences. There's the butts in the seats, as you mentioned. So you and I are standing on stage and we look out, and there's a certain gender mix, age mix, whatever, geo. We get a sense of who's coming to the shows night after night. Okay, we think that's our audience. But there are two other buckets that are crucial. One is obvious, and that's the social media, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, X, all that stuff. Um, that may not be the same as the butts in the seats. Some of those people may be not as committed. Maybe they just clicked a like. Maybe they like that one song. Maybe they're not going to go pay for a ticket to see you play live. But that's another bucket, and you can look at that data easily. There's tons of platforms out there, or you can go individually and look at the insights. So now we've got the insights of social media and YouTube platforms. Now we have sort of a sense of who that main bucket is of seeing live. The other one is commerce. Who's buying the shirts and the experiences and the Patreon and all of these things? And I think if you take those three buckets, they're going to overlap, but not entirely. And there's always things to learn. And the last thing I'll say on it is I had an artist who was shocked when we did an audit and went through and showed her who her audience was. She was blown away. Like, that's not who I thought my audience was, right? And the other thing that might surprise you is when you go into maybe a DSP, or and you see, oh my gosh, people from Taiwan or people from Zimbabwe, like, what the hell, and maybe it's just a trigger city, maybe it's just somebody's playing your music, in the local coffee shop. That's why you look at like Shazam data. If you go to Apple bought Shazam. So if you go into Apple Music for Artists, you can look at Shazam data and go, oh, Michael's and Jay's song is being played in these cities. Like, people are Shazamming it. Like, what the hell? Now they won't tell you it's Joe's Bar and Grill on the corner, but you can get a sense, and maybe we should play some live dates in some of those places. So data and analytics are, sort of near and dear to my heart. But to sort of land the plane, I think you really need to look at who your audience is, because then if you have your goals, you have your narrative, you have great music, and then you're like, okay, here's sort of who we think our audience is and who we're going to target. And then a sidebar to that is, who would we like our audience to be? Maybe our audience is a little young right now. Maybe we'd like to have a little bit older audience, or vice versa. How do we go about doing that with our marketing tools?
Mm. So good. Yeah, there's a few gems to unpack there. I mean, the first one that you brought up that kind of filled in the gaps of our conversation so far was around narrative and like purpose and the why and the
Exactly.
storytelling, and getting clear on what drives you and why does it matter, and why does it matter for you, and why does it matter for them. And having that as a core pillar of how you show up to connect with that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And audience, I think you'd probably be happy to hear that the way that Street Team is set up is that the artists own their fan data in terms of their email
That's
list and their
amazing.
phone numbers.
Yeah, it's crucial.
And and when you're talking about building audiences, that makes a lot of sense in terms of the different types of audiences and kind of thinking through the folks that actually show up live in person versus folks who are following you on socials versus the customers, and having clarity about who those people are.
Yeah.
I also really liked the what you mentioned about just the intentionality about maybe this is who your audience is right now, but actually just asking, like, who do we want our audience to be? And where do those people congregate? Where do they hang out? And how do we build that initial connection with those
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
Super smart. Jay, man, it's been great connecting, and thank you for sharing. Really these like principles that I feel like have been true probably when when you started out, and also
Yeah.
are true today, and probably going to be true many years to come, regardless of how technology changes and we evolve. As long as humans are here for the ride, then it seems like these things are still going to be true, and maybe more important than ever. In the age of AI and
Yeah.
technology, exponential increases. So thank you for being here and for sharing these lessons. And I would love to hear for anyone that's listening or watching this right now who has also resonated with this and wants to reach out and connect and or follow you on. I know you have a podcast and platforms, and you have the consulting services that you offer.
Yeah.
Where's the best place for people to go to dive deeper?
Thanks. As I tell you this, I'll leave you and your listeners with one thought, and that is the music industry has changed while you and I have been having this conversation. So it's
Mm.
evolving quickly. I love following it. I have a weekly newsletter called Your Morning Coffee. It's free. It drops every Friday, and I've been doing that for about 11 years. And then I have three podcasts, and one is Your Morning Coffee, the podcast where Mike Etchart and I break down key stories from the newsletter every week, and that drops on Monday mornings. We have a lot of really interesting guests. We have a couple that are coming up in the next week. You're going to see Dan Gill, the SVP from BMG, and you're going to see David Israelite, the head of the NMPA. So we're lifelong learners and teachers, and so your morning coffee is free. I would recommend that you get that. And just really quickly, I do a podcast with Billboard Magazine called Behind the Set List, and it's a joy. And you would be shocked at how many artists have never been asked about the songs they play live. We're having some of the top artists, in the business on that podcast. And we ask them, we do extensive research on the songs they perform live. And that's been a lot of fun. And then I do one with Michael Brandvold called Music Biz Weekly. We just passed 1 million downloads, 600 episodes. And that's really for DIY artists. And it's really, what is sync licensing and why should you care?
Mm.
Who are some people who are doing interesting things in different spaces? So yeah, and you can reach out to me either via social media or go to the Your Morning Coffee website. It's super easy. It's just yourmorning.coffee. Easiest thing in the world to remember. But I'll leave you with this thought. My grandfather used to tell me that an idiot is someone who doesn't know what you just found out. So that's the music industry. Don't feel stupid that you don't know something or understand something in the industry. Watch and listen to podcasts like this, reach out to people, ask them for advice, educate yourself, because anybody who tells you they understand all of this stuff is either lying or naive, because again, it's changed while we've been having this conversation.
Hmm. So good. I mean, honestly, the what you just shared and your overall mindset that I could just sense, like, because it's like, what is that quote? Who you are speaks louder than what you say.
Mm,
Um, but the fact that you're approaching this as like a lifelong learner, and that it's continuing to evolve and grow, and some of the surface level things change, but you've
yeah. Yes.
clearly been able to communicate sort of these undercurrents or sort of the foundations of everything. Is a great model. Great. It's very, it's something I admire. So thank you for taking the
Thank you,
space.
Michael. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time and the space to be here live. And like always, we'll put all the links in the show notes for easy access. And we'll look forward to talking again sometime soon, Jay.
All right. Cheers.